The patient had also had the valve. They had the pulmonic valve replaced. Okay, so what are these? This is an esophagram, which is also what it looks like as part of an upper GI. And these are all static films from an upper GI. Fluoroscopy, which people have taken and adapted to joint motion, is largely the domain of GI radiology. The gastrointestinal system is virtually invisible to us on plain film. Why?
It's all water density.
It's all water density. Yep. It's all water. And you got a little gas in some places. So if it's all water density, you can't see the wall of the GI tract. You can't see the hose. That's the big GI tract. And you can't see what's inside it because a lot of it's water density that's inside it. So the only way we can really evaluate the GI tract radiographically is to, one, empty out the GI tract, and two, put something in it that's opaque. That something in it is barium. Barium sulfate is what's used for GI radiology. All of this that looks white is barium sulfate. No, barium sulfate's an inert material. It's a high molecular weight material. When you add it to water, it has a milkshake consistency to it, but it absorbs the X-ray beam. It's like liquid lead, and it absorbs the beam. So we can put it inside the GI tract, and then we can see structure that we can't normally see. Hey, look at the esophagus. You can't see the esophagus on plain film. There's no way to see it unless you put something inside it. You see the little indentation right there? Yeah. Transverse aortic arch. Remember we said the trachea is displaced slightly by the transverse aortic arch, so is the esophagus, because it's right behind the trachea. So there's the esophagus. There's some down the stomach. The sphincter's right there. It's narrowed here, and it's narrowed at the top. Esophagus. And it should be nice and smooth. Nice and smooth. A swallow is a fascinating thing to watch on fluoroscopy. How the esophagus contracts and pushes the content down is fascinating to watch it. And you could watch it in real time. You can turn on the fluoroscope. I've done it because we had to do GIs in my training. Because in some states, chiropractors can do GI exams if you want. You can't in Georgia because you can't put anything in an orifice in Georgia. What a stupid rule. But in some states you can. In Illinois, chiropractors can do virtually anything except drugs and surgery. You can't have a more wide open law than that, and that's how we should legislate chiropractors. Let them do anything. You just can't do drugs, you can't write scripts, and you can't do surgery. In some states, we limit ourselves to fingers, and that's all you got. In Michigan, you couldn't even take a blood pressure for years because the chiropractors were idiots and let the legislature do that. Because some chiropractors said, we don't need to be doing blood pressures. The legislature doesn't know who to listen to. Do you listen to these over here, or do you listen to these ding-dongs over here? Then they get so confused they don't know what to do. So legislate broadly, let people practice wherever they want to. So when I was doing my training at National, we could do GI exams. We did. We had 2 fluoroscopes, and we used to do GI exams on people. We didn't do them on everybody. We did them on people that had GI complaints. So I've done enough of them. I know how they're done. Upper GI is the esophagus, stomach, duodenum. Small bowel is jejunum, ileum. And the large bowel, or barium enema, is the colon, ileocecal valve to the anus. The upper is done orally. Small bowel is done orally. The colon's too far from the mouth. So the barium, this is a lower GI, and the barium is done in a retrograde. So a lower GI is a retrograde exam. That's why it's also called a barium enema exam, because the barium is introduced through the anus and then is pumped under a little bit of pressure back. So you can see the colon. Here's your rectum, sigmoid, descending, flexure, transverse, paddock flexure, ascending down in toward the cecum, and then this is all small bowel, back into the small bowel. So it allows us to see structure that we can't normally see, and GI exams are still done. But the advent of endoscopy, where you can actually put a scope in and actually see it, has really reduced the number of GI exams that are done. Because the colon, we can do it with CT, and it's much more common to have endoscopy done, have a colonoscopy done, rather than doing this. If you're going to go to the trouble to evacuate the bowel anyway, which you have to do for this, you might as well just put a scope in and actually look at it. Then if you got any issues, you can go to this. But you can, with endoscopy, they can go all the way to the cecum with an endoscope.
How do you evacuate it?
Physically look at the whole thing. You can't do the small bowel. You're asleep when they do it.
Oh, good.
And they use propofol. And it is wonderful. It's the best sleep you can imagine. You just don't want a Michael Jackson on it.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's what through my head. I was like,
Uppers, lower, and a small bowel. This is kind of what the small bowel looks like.
normally?
Yeah,
That's normal.
yeah. All those little wrinkles are all the mucosal folds sticking into the lumen. Barium is like the water in the garden hose. So anything that sticks in the lumen displaces the barium. Tumors will stick in the lumen, displace the barium. Diverticuli are outpouches. The barium flows in to the diverticulum, and then you can see it. So, yeah, GI exams have been done for decades and decades, but not quite as much anymore as they used to be. Small bowel, you still kind of have to do it with barium, but endoscopy has really kind of reduced the number of GI exams because you can scope through the mouth, you can scope the esophagus, the stomach, even into the duodenum. And they can even go all the way in through the duodenum, partly into the small bowel. It's hard to get all the way down into the endoscopes that aren't long enough, but the endoscopes that are used today are very flexible, and the imaging is really fabulous with them. Yeah. Okay? Barium is an inert substance, and remember, a GI exam doesn't penetrate the body, does it?
Because it's a tube.
Because it's a tube, and it's continuous with the external surface. Remember, the external mucosa of the GI tract is an external body surface. And since you don't penetrate, that's why in some states chiropractors can do GI exams, because it doesn't penetrate the body. It's like pouring barium down your arm. It's no different than doing that, because you've entered an orifice, but you haven't penetrated the body.
It's not assimilated.
It's like sticking your finger in the
You haven't gone.
Yeah.
You haven't gone through the mucosa,
Right.
or you haven't gone through the skin, so you haven't penetrated the body doing it.
Wow.
Which is an odd
That's a
Yeah.
loophole.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Literally into your